I'm Elaine Denton, and I'm chairing this committee, and will be doing my best to guide us through this process with the help of Counselor John Deere, our police chief, Michael Kroll, and all of you. So I want to thank you all again for volunteering your time to this initiative. And I know John just went over a little bit about Zoom. Is there anybody who has any questions about the Zoom format? I want to make sure we're all available to use this platform. Any questions? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is introduce everyone. Everyone can. I'd like everyone to have you all introduce yourselves, so everyone can learn more about who's on this committee. And I'm just going to go around in alphabetical order by first name. So Alan, if you would like to introduce yourself, say where you're located within the town, a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Oh gosh, I'm first. Very intimidating. I'm Reverend Alan Rudnick. I'm the executive minister at DeWitt Community Church. Live in, of course, Manlius, and I live off of Whetstone Road. Elaine, I think we're neighbors, not too far away from each other. Well, anything else for the introductions?
Do you want to say kind of like why you're here? Yeah.
So I've served on in other municipalities, committees, and national leadership organizations for issues of justice, community development, and just passionate not only as a minister but also as a father, as a citizen, about making our community safe and effective. The ways in which our public safety is handled, it's done justly, it's done for the common good. Having a passion for working for organizations that work towards the common good for all, and that's the reason why I wanted to be on the committee.
Great, thank you. Okay, so next we have Bill.
Bill Harris. Yeah, I'm Bill Harris, and my wife Karen and I live at 200 East Genesee Street. We lived in Fayetteville since 1966 when I got out of the Army. I performed for 39 years in the Syracuse Symphony as principal trombone. I'm still teaching at Onondaga Community College and Syracuse University. 50 years, 52 and 50 years both. I'm going to go forever. I'm a captain of fire police in Fayetteville Fire Department. I was president of Onondaga County Volunteer Fire Police Association for 3 years. I think the mantra that by General MacArthur, duty, honor, and country, says it all. And I guess that's my mantra. You know, very proud to be a member of this organization.
Thank you so much. And I see that you go by Bill, so I'm going to write that down. So I'll try. I see we have two Bills, so I'll try to make sure I use your last names. So Bill Kutroff. Okay.
Hi, Elaine. Hi, everybody. I been living in the eastern suburbs for about 30 years. I have 2 kids. My wife is a teacher at East Syracuse, Manoa. I'm in national sales manager for a coffee company. And I'm just passionate because I started the Next Door group in the eastern suburbs, and I've gotten a lot of real passionate residents in the Manoa eastern suburb area regarding a stream on the town of Manlius Police and supporting them. So I'm here to represent and also as just an ordinary citizen.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Dominique.
Hi, I'm Dominique Barr. I live off of Center Street in Fayetteville, and I currently work for the YMCA. I've worked for them for the past 10 years in their camps and school age program. And I'm on this committee to bring a young voice, a Black voice, to the public and for everyone to feel represented in their concerns throughout public safety.
Thank you. And Jim? I lost.
Okay, I'm Jim Brule. I live in the Brookside section of Fayetteville. We've lived here for about 35 years. I grew up in Syracuse. We lived outside of the community for about 10 years, but we raised our kids here and very happy to be here. I'm Jewish clergy. I'm a spiritual storyteller. And so I do a lot of work actually around the country, helping communities heal through storytelling across fractures. I come from a multicolored family, so we have, you name it, we've got it in our family, and that's a great source of richness. I think I joined here because it's really part of what I see is our mission is to not only welcome others, but actually treasure them and be humble before differences. And so I want to see that carried through here in Fayetteville, in Manlius.
Thank you. And then Juliana?
Hi, I'm Juliana Smith.
Sorry.
You're okay. I serve as the Deputy Athletics Director at Colgate University. I am new to Onondaga County and Manlius. I live here on Smith Street. But I'm looking for a way to be more involved in the community since I don't work here and I only live here. This is a way for me to serve and be present, even though I'm not here throughout the day. Well, now I am, but typically I'm usually not here. So yeah, I'm excited to serve.
Thank you. And Christine?
Hi there. I actually just wrote a little introduction. This is not my normal thing, so I figured I would just introduce myself that way. My name is Christine Kinsella-Zettler, and I was born and raised in Fayetteville. I now live in Manlius in the Huntwood area. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I have a private practice in Fayetteville, and I've been there since 2014. I was interested in becoming a part of this committee because I've had some long-held and growing concerns for the stressors confronted by police officers in our communities, locally and nationwide. Coupled with this is my concern for vulnerable members of our communities that are often feeling their own sets of stressors, whether they're financial, emotional, or physical, to name just a few. And as we've seen playing out on the national stage right now, stressors that specifically impact communities of color around the country. One result of this being widespread distrust between police departments and their community members, which increases the tension and the safety concerns. More and more often over the last 11 years, I'm seeing police officers daily in my practice describing trauma symptoms that range in severity from depression and hopelessness to am I still there? Can you still hear me? Okay, good. You all froze. In severity from depression and hopelessness to a collection of symptoms that can definitively be diagnosed as PTSD. And I too have worked with members of the community who are feeling financially and emotionally desperate. And I've seen a decline in people's trust in local and national institutions. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and there's no doubt in my mind that it is impacting people inside of our police departments and in the communities they are policing. And this creates a real need for trauma sensitivity training for our first responders, our schools, and our public in general. Systemic issues require systemic solutions. And as a family therapist, the foundation of my training is systems theory. So as a proud member of this community for my lifelong, and someone who supports the police officers and community members in seeking safety emotionally and relationally, I wanted to be a contributor to any solutions that are being considered. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. I think Rob, you go by Rob, right? Robert?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there another Rob or am I it?
Nope, you're it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rob
I think
Winter.
you missed me.
I did. You did. You missed Nadine. I think
I did miss Nadine.
Yeah, I'm going to back off.
Sorry about that. Nadine?
Hi, I'm Nadine, and I live in Kirkville, New York, pretty far north. I raised two beautiful daughters who graduated from ESM. Know Bill's wife. Yeah, was Bill here? Where'd he go? There he is. So I was also on the ESM school board for 8 years. So I'm really big in policy review, and I actually love all of that, which is kind of strange. I spent 20 years as a police officer. I retired 10 years ago, which makes me feel very, very old. I spent a couple of years working at the Y, and then I went to the town of DeWitt Police Department, where I work as a part-time clerk. And I also work as a part-time EAP coordinator for the Center for Family Life and Recovery, which I also feel very passionate about mental health and mental health for police officers. So I think it's a very big topic, weighs heavily on my heart. I wanted to be on this because my passion has always been to be involved in the community, even as a police officer. I think anybody who knew me as a police officer would say that was my number one goal, was community service and being involved. And I wanted to make my little part of the world the best part of the world. And I felt a little lost over the last couple of months. I didn't feel like I was doing my best to get out there and help people. So when I saw this opportunity come up, I thought, this is great. I can at least help my little corner of the world again. So that's why I'm here.
Great, thank you. Rob?
Hi, I worked with Nadine for a number of years, so I knew when I should back off and let her speak. My name is Rob Winter. I live on Hogue Lane in Fayetteville. My wife, Jen, and we have two daughters that are 11 and 16. We've been here since 1994, originally from the Old Forge area. I too retired from the town of Manlius Police Department about 10 years ago. And since then, I'm a trainer and an instructor in first aid and emergency care and CPR for an industrial safety company, as well as SU and some other per diem jobs, and heavily into the volunteer side with the ski patrol and with Bill at Fayetteville Fire. But when I was with the department, I was really interested. I felt that it was important to be invested in the community, that the community's concerns were our concerns and vice versa. So when my wife brought this to my attention, I immediately wanted to be a part of it. I think communication is key. I love where I live. I'm proud of it, but the community, it's always good to have a dialogue. Nothing is ever perfect. And I think that this is a good constructive thing to talk. That's our biggest problem, in my opinion, when communication breaks down. I can tell you in 30 years of marriage, that's the biggest obstacle. When communication breaks down, the machine breaks down. So that's why I'm here. And I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. And Ryan?
Hi, everyone. Ryan Drake, born and raised here in Manlius. Spent a few years grad school and down in the city, and then my wife and I moved back here to Manlius. We're off the Brickyard Falls neighborhood. I'm involved through my nonprofit downtown, CNY Jazz, in several of these discussions. We run a program, particularly in the summer, called Jazz in the City. We can combine health and human service agencies through what we do with our concerts and intercity neighborhood performances. One of the major parts of that is bringing in firefighters, EMS, and police officers down to intermingle with the community and kind of have humanizing and one-on-one experience between the neighborhood and community members, as well with the officers. So I'm also on the advocacy committee for the Grammys Foundation as well. So we're having a lot of these discussions. But being that most of those discussions are in downtown Syracuse and in New York, I figured it'd be advantageous to kind of jump and be a part of the dialogue here in my own community that I've grown up in, and I'm now trying to reestablish myself as a part of. So just glad to be here and a part of the discussion, and hoping to bring some benefit to the table. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. And Tony?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Waddell. I'm originally was born and raised in Rockingham, North Carolina, a very, very little small town in the South. Is everybody having a hard time hearing me? Let me turn this up real quick. Sorry about that.
You're a little low.
Nobody can hear him.
All right, let me turn this up. All right, can everybody hear me now? Still can't hear me?
It's better, but you're faint.
All right, let me pull this right up to me. How about now? All righty. My name is Tony Waddell. I'm originally from a small town in North Carolina, Rockingham, North Carolina. I moved here with my family in Syracuse, near the Syracuse area, back in 2013 to fulfill an assignment with the United States Air Force. And after 21 years of service, I decided to retire and raise my family here. I live at the very, very far end of the town of Manlius, out here off of Route 5 in the Magnum Farms community, right before you hit Chittenango. When this opportunity came up, I thought that I could basically bring a unique perspective, a world view perspective after traveling around the world for so many years, and basically be involved in our local community, working with our police officers to basically bring forth and work to usher in this change issued by the governor, but also at the same time to make sure that we maintain their uniqueness, the uniqueness of our community, and not place them in a box with the rest of the country. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's everyone. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sally. Oh, sorry. So go ahead. Sorry.
Not a problem. After listening to everyone, I just want to sit back because you've got it all covered. I'm Sally Lisi. For the past 42 years, I was involved in education, the last 16 of which I was principal over at Immaculate Conception School in Fayetteville. I presently live in the Manoa Farms area. And when this came up, I've been retired now for 2 years. And when this opportunity came up, I was ready to jump in. I thought, I know the impact that the officers have had as when they came into school, and the kids would just look forward to seeing them. And then later on, to hear them talk about how they felt welcomed by the officers. And I think it's such an important program, and I would hate to see that leave our schools. But I also, on another part of this, is that I see the trauma that our students go through, whether it's from something going on at home, or certainly with all of this pandemic going on now. But our children need to be kept in mind through all of this too, and how do we care for them? So I hope I can bring that to the table as we think about these little ones in our lives, whether they are 4 years old or 18 years old. They need our help right now. Along with that, I hope I represent the residents here in the Manoa area. So that's what I hope I can bring to this table. And I thank you for welcoming me to this group.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that's also, I am going to let John introduce himself as well.
So hi everybody, John Deere, one of the town councilors here. When Elaine said that we were going to be putting this committee together, I was really excited to hop on, not because of any interesting perspectives I might have on it, but because I know, especially with a group this big, it's a very diverse group. So I wanted to be here for a lot of logistical reasons. I want to make sure that when we're communicating, it's effective. I want to make sure the Zoom calls go well, but also to help facilitate the conversation however it's needed to be. I originally, when me and my wife moved up here to the Syracuse area, I was a database developer at a local company in the village of Manlius. Since then, I've become a political organizer. I work on campaigns now. So over the last few years, I've really learned how to help people have honest conversations with each other and about tough situations sometimes. And so that's why I was so excited to be on this. And I do think what I'm most looking forward to is especially for Elaine and I, to be able to take a step back and make sure that everyone on this committee understands that you are an equal member of this committee. And we are not here to, Elaine and I do not have a plan that we want to, have approval of. We want to work together with everyone on this committee to build something that's meaningful, that's helpful, because the end goal is to produce something that is a suggestion or a proposal to the town board. And so for me to have a lot of my opinions heard to then be proposed to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm here in any way that I can help, kind of facilitate conversation, keep things moving, because I'm really excited because, just especially now after hearing everyone else speak, I think we have some incredibly valuable perspectives. I think as someone who hasn't, who wasn't born here, who didn't grow up here, I think it's going to be great to be able to have all those different perspectives, backgrounds, everything. So that's why I'm here. So if there's any ever technical questions or anything like that, I'm definitely the guy. So let me know. But other than that, I'm really excited, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody take up some space, really bring ideas to the table, and not just ones that we think are going to be easy to talk about. Because if we don't have some tough conversations, this isn't a very good use of everyone's time. So I'm just really excited for that. And I do just want to thank everybody. I ran for office, and now I'm giving a whole lot of time to the town, and I can't think of a better way to spend it. And I'm just happy that everyone else here has stepped up. You really are serving, you're making a difference, and we really want everyone's opinion. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really excited.
Thanks, John. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce myself. I live in the town of Manlius. I've lived here about a little over 10 years. I am a graphic designer, a mom of 3, and I volunteer with many different organizations. And as a town councilor, I am also on many different committees, and I am including the police committee and the fire committee. So now I would like to turn this over to Chief Kroll to introduce himself, to provide a little bit more about Manlius PD. I know some of us are very familiar and some maybe not so much. And then also about what the county is doing on this initiative as well.
Great, thank you, Councilor Denton, I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. And my name's Mike Kroll. I am the police chief, your police chief for the town of Manlius Police Department. And first, before I go on about what Elaine mentioned, I just want to say a wonderful thank you to everybody that's participating in this project. I know how difficult it is to find time in our busy lives to be able to contribute in this way, so I very much appreciate that. 2 years ago, I started a similar exercise where we had 17 members throughout the town come in and talk about what they would like to see in their police department, which is part of a strategic plan. And unfortunately, I'm still developing that because we've had so many distractions recently. But thank you so much for being here. A little bit about the myself, I guess, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on me, but I've started my 32nd year in law enforcement, 17 of which I spent at the town of Manlius Police Department. And also currently I'm the chair of the Onondaga County Chiefs of Police, Chapter Chiefs of Police Association, which I really enjoy to a great deal. So TMPD If you don't know, we service approximately around 32,000 people live in the town of Manlius. That includes the village of Fayetteville, village of Manlius, village of Manoa, areas of Fremont, areas of East Syracuse, areas of Kirkville, and like we heard from Tony earlier, areas of Chittenango and that new development off of Route 5. So we have a huge variety of areas that we cover. Currently, our budget support includes 38 full-time police officers and 8 civilian employees. We are really the youngest police department in Onondaga County. If you didn't know that, I say that because prior to 1985, there were actually 3 village police departments in the town of Manlius. And back in 1985, they decided that it would be a great idea to consolidate services, which they did, which was probably one of the most successful police consolidation programs that has been recognized in Onondaga County. With that, they formed what's called an intermunicipal agreement, which we currently follow. And that intermunicipal agreement is representative of town officials as well as officials from each one of the 3 villages within the town of Manlius. And we essentially report to the police committee by this intermunicipal agreement. Our agency is accredited. We're accredited by 2 organizations, both New York State accreditation as well as an organization called CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. Just to give you an idea, there's 600 police departments, or between 500 and 600 police departments, depending on how you classify them in New York State. And of those number of agencies, there's only, I think the last count was 6 that were CLIA accredited, and Manlius PD is one of those. We're real proud of that. If you're not familiar with accreditation, basically it's a group of individuals from various aspects of law enforcement. They come up with standards for law enforcement. And we have to comply with those standards every single year in order to maintain our accreditation process. The TMPD provides a wide variety of services to the community, mostly based on community policing services. And our agency on average responds to about 22,000 calls of service each and every year for our department. Councilor Denton is chairing this particular group, just so you have an idea of how this is going to go. And but you should also be aware, and I'm very excited to be a co-chair for the county-wide group that Councilor Denton mentioned earlier. The county-wide group has been spearheaded from the district attorney of Onondaga County, and I am one of 5 co-chairs on that committee. And we're going to be examining all of the items that is listed in the governor's executive order 203 on police reform. And our intent on the county-wide group is to examine all of these topics and then come up with some type of resolution or solution to those issues that have been identified in the executive order. I'm hoping that each municipality in Onondaga County that has a police department will adopt that plan and take a really close look at it, and then locally implement that plan in order to make a positive change for law enforcement in Onondaga County. And lastly, I just wanted to say that if questions come up and I don't address those questions immediately, it's because my intent is to do a lot of listening. That's the intent, and I think the purpose of this this meeting. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of listening, and at some point, I promise I will address each and every one of the questions or issues or concerns that come up. And I very much look forward to the input from this group, and I'll be taking that input to the countywide initiative, and I'm hoping we'll come up with a countywide plan that the town of Manlius will adopt, and we'll all learn from this great experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Kroll. Okay, so I hope everyone has had a chance to look over the executive order from Governor Cuomo. And although there's a lot to this executive order, it's great that multiple agencies are working on it. Of course, we'll be looking at this at a very local level with this committee. So I don't believe we have to tackle everything. The county will be working on this as well, as the chief said. So that's really great. We can focus on, again, a local level. So our goal, especially with this committee, will be community engagement. So when the county has their recommendations and we develop our own, our community will have been consulted throughout that process. So keeping that in mind, I am hoping to keep these meetings once a month. Does anyone, we can change this if we decide to, but does anyone at this moment think we need to meet more than once a month? Okay, that's good to know. It's good to know. So I'll keep that in mind. Anyone else? I just saw one. Okay.
I guess it also depends on how things transpire. I mean, there may be a revelation that it's, oh, we need to do this and that. So it's a possibility.
Okay, good to know. And so the nice thing too, it seems like everyone's good with Thursday evenings are working, are pretty open for people. So I think based on that availability, I would like to propose that we meet every second Thursday of the month. How does that sound? That means our next meeting would be September 10th, which is in 2 weeks. So that's kind of short. Nice. So any thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Bill Harris. Can you unmute?
Sorry, I was muted. Both Rob and I have a Thursday night association, fire department association meeting, which would preclude us from being on the second Thursday of the month.
Okay. The other option was the fourth Thursday, but we do have November and December have lots of holidays. Any thoughts?
So just so everyone is aware, basically what that would mean is it would be September 24th. It would be October 22nd. Then it would be November 26th and December 24th. So what might make sense is maybe for the next 2 months, we do the fourth Thursday. And then as we get closer to the holidays, perhaps we can just find a day that'll work for everybody for November and December. Does that seem reasonable to everybody? Okay, cool. So we'll say then the next meeting would be on the 24th of September and then the 22nd of October.
Okay.
Elaine, I recognize in a group like this, inevitably someone's going to have conflict. So, go with the majority if other people may be affected by the 24th. So, it's cool. You got to do it. Go with what works for the majority. But if everybody likes the 24th, then that's awesome, obviously, for Bill and I.
Okay. So let's continue and then we'll reevaluate just at the end of the meeting just to make sure we're all set for 4 weeks instead of 2, okay? So the next thing I want to talk about is just communication between meetings. We were looking to creating an email that would forward to everyone, but we weren't able to set that up quite yet. I'm not sure if we'll be able to. So right now, I think I'll be sending just an email with basically like a tree, everyone's email in one email. And I can send everyone their contact information so you can contact each other. Okay. And so I do believe most of our discussions should happen in our meetings, but if people have resources they would like to share with everyone, I think that would be great to keep sharing in this. Julianne.
So you are still working on the email that will distribute to all members? It's just not ready yet. Is that correct?
We're just waiting on clarification from the IT group that we work with. So for now, we'll just CC everybody. Just be aware, if you're going to respond, it's going to everybody if you hit reply all. And if you just want to communicate with Elaine and I, you can just trim it down. But that'll be, for now, the easiest way for us to communicate.
Understood. I guess the question specifically is, we are working on an email that would distribute to everyone if someone sends it to that direct email. So for instance, if a citizen or someone else wanted to send a message to the committee, they could and everyone would receive it eventually.
Yes.
Okay.
That is the goal.
Yeah, we're going to hopefully have that email set up. And if we do run into issues with it, what we'll end up doing is we'll set up a form. So like if people wanted to, instead of just emailing it, they would go out, fill out the form, and then it'll email the form to everybody so that everybody can see, what we're bringing in.
Okay. So, and then that too, if you have ideas or agenda items, you can send them to the group or to me or John. Okay. All right. Okay. So now the fun part, we can talk about community engagement. So let's see.
Could I ask a question just before we get there?
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about the relationship between our committee and the county. So could we just spend a moment on that and help me understand? Because I didn't realize that the county was generating the plan that we were recommending to, but expected to accept. That was not my understanding. So
yes. So they are working on it and they will generate their own plan, but then this committee can look at that plan, and the police committee from the town will also be looking at that plan. And it's, again, that's why we created this committee. So we be ready for the recommendations, and then we can, this committee is built on residents. And so we can instantly get resident feedback on their plan, as well as your networks. So that's my plan. I don't know if Chief Kroll has anything to add.
No, that's accurate. The governor threw a lot at us in a real short period of time. And he identified 15 or 16 specific topics that need to be addressed. And the way the executive order 203, the way it reads, it says that there needs to be community engagement. And it's my understanding through our county-wide group is that every police department in Onondaga County is going to have to address the same issues. All 15 or 16 of those issues that are addressed in the executive order. So what the county plans to do in the county initiative is come up with a plan to be able to address all of those 15 or 16 issues in the executive order. And then once those are identified, well, they're really not identified, they're listed. That'll be a part of a plan that the town of Manlius will look at and then gauge those issues based on our community specific. So
let me just, I'm also a regulatory person, so that's why I like to ask these questions. So let's say there's something in the county plan that we think is irrelevant to us. Do they own the plan and we have to live with it, or do we create our own plan that makes an exception in that case? I don't have anything in mind. I'm just interested in how that works.
No, at this point, it looks like the reason why we wanted to do this countywide initiative, this broad-based plan, is because every police department has to address each and every one of these 14 or 50 issues. If the town of Manlius and this group decides, or the police committee really is the final legislative body that would be able to have the authority to address each one of these issues. If they say that, okay, the county plan includes this one item and that's not applicable to the town of Manlius, then they decide to do that.
Okay.
And then it can kind of break down from there. And the reason why the county initiative decided to do that through the DA is because, as I mentioned before, every police department has to address these issues. Now, we're real fortunate in the town of Manlius because we have a super strong community and this is going to sound biased, right? But a really great police department. And we can probably address those issues specifically, but other areas of Onondaga County can't, like the Village of Jordan, for instance, or some small agency. They just don't have the resources to do this. So we want to adopt this plan that every police department can sort of adopt. And then at that point, they can form it in any way they see fit based on community need. And that's why it's so important. And this is a great group of individuals who can be able to look at that and be able to say, okay, here's the countywide plan, but these are the things that we need to look at specifically in the town of Manlius. And
so they're doing the heavy lifting, but we own the final product, and it's up to us to say, this is what we're going to recommend go forward.
You got it, Jim.
Okay.
You're spot on.
Just looking for clarity. That's all. Thanks.
Christine?
I've been doing a little bit of research, and I'm just curious about, I think that that's great that the county that will have all of that resource. But my curiosity is, how are we determining what the actual issues are in our communities? And are we, like, not just in the community, but within the police department and feedback from the officers as well? I'm just curious, like, is there a questionnaire or is there a survey? I've looked at other departments that have done that, and I found it very interesting how they got feedback from the community and from their officers. I'm wondering, do we have something like that, or is that something we are meant to do and put that in place?
So that's what we want to talk about, is community engagement. And so I have an idea, and I want to run past through everyone to see what you guys think. So my idea is basically so instead of we can't bring out what we want to focus on because we haven't reached out to the community. We need to ask them questions. But really what I would like to do is have them ask the questions and we review them. So hold on, let me get back to, let's see. So I'm just gonna read this and see if it makes sense. So I said, so for the first couple of these meetings, we'll need to know what we should be focusing on, and then looking based on that feedback, putting those into presentations to inform our residents. So, so before we dive into this work, I would like to ask our community what questions they have about their police department. And so I've kind of made a form. It's very basic. It just asks, do you have questions for your police department? So that way we can get anything possible. And then at our next meeting, we'll collect all those questions, and I will make sure that you all have access to them before our meeting. So you can review all the list of questions, and we can kind of start to see if there's themes. And then at the same time, we can all pick 3 to 5 of our questions that we think are important, and we'll discuss them at the next meeting. Once we collect those questions, I think, again, that will kind of start bringing about what we could focus on a local level. And then at the same time, I've seen a lot of presentations by police departments about their policies, which I think is great. What I would like to do is take some of those questions, especially the ones that keep repeating, and hand them over to our police department. So when they give a presentation to us, they're based on questions that the community has already asked. So that's my idea. So if anyone wants to tell me what you think.
So I just want to kind of build off of that. And the idea here is we don't have, the executive order basically in a lot of ways says in your community, have a conversation and then make recommendations. And so that's why we did a really rigorous application process. I am happy to say everyone here had amazing applications, and we were very happy with the amount we received. But the goal here is each of you is responsible for making sure that we're communicating with our neighbors and finding out, and I don't want to say issues because we don't have a lot of glaring issues. Otherwise, we would be looking at directly solving those. And so this is more about having those conversations with everybody and saying, hey, watch the meetings. Look at the conversations we're having. Are there things that you are maybe concerned about, that you have questions, and things ideas that you have to build better? Because I will tell you right now, through the CALIA accreditation, our police department has more training, more qualifications than, the 500 police departments in the state. And so we're not, you know, if there's issues we need to look at, we can look at that. But a lot of this too is, what do we think that we can do better? How can our police department change or adapt to better serve the community? And, you know, I think when the chief was listing off all of the areas of town that the police department is responsible for, that is answering to, you know, we made sure that we have folks from every part of the town here. Because I live right off of Genesee Street in the Homewood area. I live in a very different community than a lot of the folks already on this call. So it's up to us to say, what are the conversations we want to have, to go out and talk to your neighbors? What questions do you have? What ideas do you have? Bring those back to this group, and then we can start having that discussion. And not only that, but we're live on Facebook. Anybody can join these Zoom meetings to see us. So it's about having those conversations out in the open, so that maybe we're having a conversation and it leads down one path. Anybody watching can say, hey, you know, maybe you didn't cover this, or I'd love to hear more about this. And then that way we are kind of bringing the community in to have this overall conversation. So we you know, Elaine and I, like I said before, we're not going to be bringing an agenda of like 4 questions we need to answer. We're really going to be working together to build our own agenda, and, you know, then look at the county plan and all these other things. So, you know, I will say it maybe seems a little nebulous, but once you start talking to folks about you being on this committee and what ideas they have, or what good and bad experiences do they have, I think we'll really start to see, you know, a plan, our own plan, start to develop, that we can then look at, you know, the county plan and say, okay, awesome. You know, some of the best brains in law enforcement in Onondaga County think this is the right prescription. We also have a series of options and things that we think might work best. And then our job is to work those together, so that when the proposal goes to the town board and the police committee, they know, you know, not only are we getting, you know, things that are legally required, but also the things that are going to help our community as much as possible. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I also want to say, I did read the 2019 report that you shared. I actually had read that prior to that, and I do want to say, I did look and see about the CALIA, because it was really amazing, and the community engagement piece is so extensive. And I just wanted to mention that to the chief. And also, I have a lot of interest in the Citizens Police Academy. I wanted to bring that up and talk about that at some point as well. I think that's an amazing resource that if we could get some engagement with that, I think everyone on our committee should attend, because we would have such a greater understanding of what the police encounter and deal with. So anyway.
And I actually,
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Mike, do you still do the community survey through the Maxwell School at SU?
Every single year. We've done it for, I don't know, 15 years.
Thanks.
Julia?
So I think I don't know if I'm missing this, or if I just had a different perspective of how this committee would be engaged in the actual work related to what's included in the governor's executive order, because there are specific things that relate to bias, and I don't know that this conversation we just had talks about an actual review of our policies. Like, all of the trainings and stuff that are listed in the annual report that I reviewed are great, and I think are necessary for law enforcement. But I didn't catch anywhere where there is intentional training from a lens of racial bias that has been completed for our department. And that, as I understand the executive order, is what's being asked of the local municipalities. So if Onondaga County is not doing it for the town of Manlius, we haven't talked about it here that we're going to do it. So when is that actual review? Like, when are we going to get the data or someone to objectively look at our policies and how we train our officers to determine whether or not we don't have those problems? But I think Councilor Deere said we don't have those problems here. I want to believe that to be true, but we don't know that until we look at everything that we're doing from a lens of an actual study. So I guess that's my question. Where does that fit into this process with the April 2021 deadline and us waiting for Onondaga County to come up with a plan for us to respond to. Like, conversations are great, but that's what town board meetings are for. So if this committee is not the one leading the charge on the actual review, or at least helping to facilitate that, I'm not sure how we are different than other committees that are already in existence.
Thank you for that. That's a good point. And I think too, especially with everyone who's on this committee, I know Julianne, you're a policy person. And I know we have a couple, I think Ryan, I think you were also, yes. So, and I'm not, so, so that's really where, and we have law enforcement backgrounds here. So all of that expertise, right, the town board members need to hear from, so we can make that, like those recommendations, and even just that idea of doing a study. I like that idea, and I don't know if Chief Kroll has any ideas on those comments as well.
I would welcome any kind of study for our police department to allow us to do a better job. Again, I said earlier I was going to do a lot of listening, but I feel compelled to specifically respond to that. As part of our CLIA accreditation process, we're mandated to do bias-based policing on an annual basis. So we've been doing that for as long as we've been accredited, which is 1996. So before people even started thinking about it back in 1996, we were doing training on bias-based policing, and we started collecting data on our engagement and involvement with certain members of our community, whether if it was enforcement or otherwise. So we're pretty far ahead of that. Now that training, it could be enhanced, it could be improved, and I'm definitely welcome. I would welcome any kind of suggestion or idea or resources to be able to allow us to improve in that area.
So if could I, so just a couple of comments there. One is if we've been gathering data on that for years, I would say that should be something that should come to us. So we can say, is there a trend? Is there, what can we learn from what's been already collected? Is it, we can kind of assess the robustness of the data that's collected and say, are we collecting the right things or not? I mean, we have no way of knowing at this point. The other thing I would say is, while we're all very pleased to be living where we are, otherwise we wouldn't be living here, asking, the hardest thing to ask for is for the thing you don't know, right? That's invisible to you because you think everything's great. And I mean that for us individually, right? So how do we look out into the community and say, these are the things that are beneath the radar that nobody's looking for because we're satisfied with our lives. How do we poke at that and say, these are concerns we know are in other places. How do we know they're not going on here? I don't mean to be critical, other than say, if that's our duty, is to go out and do, as Juliana says, the look at how this is all playing out in our community, then I think many people here think there is no problem, so we wouldn't know to comment on it. So I'd like to probe into that. Somehow, I don't have a specific suggestion, but I think that was kind of for me, the meat behind the governor's charge was to say, look, this has been a problem in ways that communities have not been aware of. Let's pull back the covers and see what we can do.
Thank you. I feel like this committee is ready to get to work. Is there anybody who would like to speak who hasn't spoken yet? Just checking. Everyone's okay? Christine, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, I think you both said it more clearly than I did, but that's why I was bringing up the idea of something more formal. And I wouldn't want us reinventing the wheel if we were going to do something like that. And so I've already found a couple of examples where they did a very good job of asking the questions. And so I just wanted to say, I agree. I think we need something that would ask the questions. I don't think there are glaring issues. And I thought you said it so well about, you know, it's the thing that we don't know. We don't know if it's there. So how would we know unless we ask? And I think that asking our friends and family or people, our neighbors, that's a nice informal way of gathering some questions. But I would like us to be asking the questions if that's possible.
And yes, that would absolutely, we would be collecting questions from the greater community, and absolutely we'd be collecting questions from all of you. And we will make sure we organize them in that way. I know John Deere wanted to say something.
So I think those are all good things. I know DeWitt is doing these listening sessions that have proven to be pretty successful. So if that's something that we want to pursue, we can absolutely do that. We do have, you know, we can do those things. You know, we have the ability to, however we think it's best to, you know, determine the things we don't know, how to probe for those things or to collect the data. So whatever ideas we as a group have, whether it's a listening session, a survey, looking at previous data, like that's why we're here, to figure out how we answer those questions together.
Anyone else?
If I could just say one quick thing. I know at the beginning, one of the gentlemen said that we have to keep in mind communication. And isn't this what we've all been talking about right now? That whole art of communication. Chief, when you were speaking and talking about the accreditation, how many of our 35,000 residents know about the accreditation and what that entails? I know what I had to go through for accreditation for the school, and it's intense. So I think that's part of the communication process. Again, as a community, we don't know what's out there either. We don't know those unknowns. So we don't know what we don't know. And any means of communication we can take advantage of, I think is important.
Elaine, if I may. You know, when I was actively working, I always said to people, if you don't have to think about the police department, we're doing our job. And if you have a sense of security and you can go on about your lives in the community without concern or worry that you have someone serving you effectively. And I think a lot of that comes down to people getting more aware of what has been collected over the years. You know, we have all this data, but, you know, not everyone will like law enforcement. But they need to know that if they live in the community, that they'll be treated fairly and the officers will act objectively. And I think a lot of, in my experience, we worked very hard to give people that sense of security. But what I'm hearing is there are many of you, some are newer to the community. It doesn't matter whether you've been here 30 years or 3. If you get more invested, part of the mechanism is maybe getting more familiar with the department. So it's not this abstract, you know, entity. When you start to realize what the men and women there are doing and how they feel about the community, the Citizens Police Academy was a huge benefit to that. But there are budgets to be concerned with. There's staffing to be concerned with. The chief can only fill so many roles. But I think part of it comes down, if you guys we have to have a mechanism, at least in this small group, to say, look, what about this? And maybe if you get that on the table first so you have some comfort, I think that might be helpful because there's so many people in the community that have that. I don't know, Elaine, how the best mechanism to get that unless people speak up and say, I have a question. But, you know, if they know that we're objectively looking at everything, and that includes, you know, as a record with the department, you know, looking at every complaint, and they're all documented. All that stuff it's well done, but you need to know that because that's what makes the department good. There's no shadows. There's no rocks that need to be, you know, it's out there for people. And that's one of the values of CALEA is having that exposure. And I think the more those of you who are not intimately familiar with the department get to see that, I think you'll be proud to live where you live. And you'll want to say, could it be tweaked a little bit? Sure, maybe. But you know what? We got a pretty good thing right now, but how do we keep that? How do we maintain that? How do we implement all this? I want you all to feel as good as I did when I was there about what the citizens got. And that's really what we should be getting. You should feel good about where you live, you know, as best you can in America today. You know, you should feel good about that. And I think, you know, to that end, people need to be able to feel free to speak with a question or a perception, you know. I'm not sure that came out right. It's a little long-winded, but hopefully you understand the intent.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that when we do survey our community, and we need to target the people that feel targeted in this community. If you give a survey out to somebody who doesn't feel targeted, they're gonna say everything's fine. But if you send it out to somebody who is targeted, they're gonna tell you how they feel. And I think you don't know if there's a problem because you're not being targeted. But there's lots of people in the community who are, and I know that they would have something completely different. So when we do give a survey or whatever process we're going to do, I think we need to make it a point to, you know, make sure it's available for everyone to know that this is happening. Like we said, communication. I didn't know anything about the police department like that, and I've lived here for 10 years. It's not my job to go to the police department and find out what they're doing. They, as our community leaders, should be telling us what's out there and what they're doing for us. We don't need to go find that information.
Thank you. Okay, so, so I'm wondering what to do next. I know we were talking about a survey, but I still, though you can always, especially when you ask a question, you can, you know what I mean? You can ask it in such a way that you're really not getting like that. I can't, okay. But so, oh, go ahead, yes, maybe.
Elaine, so I wanted to address what Dominique said first, but I think she's right on target. I think when we look for information from our community, I've been involved in the community. When I say I've been involved in the community, I have done huge events. I've done small events. I'm always increasingly frustrated when I get no response. So the problem you run into is when people are happy, they do not give a response. So take neighborhood watch for a second. If we're doing neighborhood watch in a neighborhood that has not been targeted, we get nobody that comes. If you do neighborhood watch in a neighborhood that's just had 40 car larcenies over the last 2 weeks, everybody comes. I don't like the word survey, hate the word survey. I think what we need to do is we need to engage where, for example, where we can use Dominique for this, where young people get their information from. You know, we have a Facebook page, but how many young people are on our Facebook page? Do we need to do Instagram? Do we need to get involved? Because when we go to the press, you know, people aren't reading the newspaper anymore. People aren't looking at the Eagle Bulletin like they used to. We can engage our older people with that type of stuff, but we really have to focus on how are we going to engage our community when they don't feel, and I'm not saying everybody, they need to be engaged. So I think that we need to find a way, like it's all well and good to say we need to engage people that want to be engaged, but we try. I know that Mike has tried. I know I have tried, not just in the police department, but in all the other roles I've served in this community. If people don't want to be involved, they don't want to be involved. So I think the first thing we need to do is figure out how we want to engage these people. I think you had a good idea too with us simply asking people, what do you want to know about the police department? But like Rob just said, the Citizen Police Academy is like a 6-week police academy for 20 people. That's not going to help anybody. That's going to help the people that are interested and want to know what the police department is. That's not going to help the people we're trying to help. So I feel like we need to think bigger, but we also need to whittle it down. Like, who can help us get this information out to the folks who want to answer these questions? Sorry, I just wanted to address the communication part of it.
And just a quick, you know, the next door community is a Facebook for our neighborhoods. And it's a great opportunity for getting feedback. Although I do agree, Elaine, the way the questions are asked and the method of how that is, you know, brought to, you can get a completely different answer. So I agree completely with that. And I'm here to help on the next door end of it, either with feedback surveys, getting any type of information out.
I think Alan wanted to say something.
So I have a different question, not necessarily having to do with survey or how to go about survey. Reading the executive order, it was pretty clear the governor was outlining dozens of different policies to some of the things that we were talking about, guidelines, training, programs. It's a lot. It's comprehensive. Will we be getting that type of information of what the town and the police department, what these policies are, to get in our hands, to read, to look over? Because I really think that that's a lot of information, and it's going to take quite some time to digest that. Is there how would that information be distributed? Because I think it's pretty germane to what we're talking about. We're talking about, if we're surveying or people feel targeted, not targeted, to look at these policies, to look at these programs that the police in the town that, I know I haven't seen. I don't know if they're publicly available or if they're you have to request them.
Chief Kroll, can you answer that?
There's a lot there, but I think that the countywide group is definitely going to address every single one of the issues in the governor's executive order 203. And locally, we'll have an opportunity to examine each and every one of those as compared to town of Manlius Police Department. And that's kind of like one of the points I was looking to make is, even though I'm the co-chair for Onondaga County, my true interest is town of Manlius, right? So I want to make sure that each and every one of those items that are listed in the executive order are going to be addressed accordingly, but related specifically to the town of Manlius, because our needs and interests are different than the city of Syracuse, for instance, or some other agency. As far as the surveys, the surveys are sent out randomly. I have a clerk that does that, and she literally randomly selects individuals that receive service from the town of Manlius Police Department, and we send those out. And now we could work on the questions. In fact, we recently thought about working on those questions, because the last engagement we had with Syracuse University and our contract with them was they collected all of the responses to those survey questions and then tallied them up in a large report. And I'd be more than happy to share that with everybody, because there's nothing to hide. Typically we get, good responses and we get negative responses. It's policing, right? You can't make everybody happy all the time. So we could reformulate those questions in these surveys, because that seems to be what people are talking about. But I'd be happy to do that. In fact, we were going to engage in that exercise this year to change up the questions so that they better address the needs of the community. That's what the intent is on the survey.
I ask a follow-up question. Will this group be able to see policies, like, for instance, the mandate talks about use of force policy, conflict resolution? Will this group see that data, that information, those policies?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share with this group all of our policies. Our use of force policy specifically is on our website. It's available for everybody to view. So if you were to go to the Town of Manlius Police Department website, you'll click on a link and you can see our entire policy on use of force. And many of the items that are listed in the executive order they are not subject to review. They became law through executive order, and we've immediately implemented those changes, and you'll see that in policy. But again, just like anything else, we're wide open to review and questions, and we'll consider each and every one of those things.
Jim, do you mind if I just say a couple things? So okay, so it sounds like we have a couple action items here. So one, I will be happy to serve as kind of the go-between. So if there's specific things we want to request from the police department, or if you want to go straight to the chief, feel free. But we'll look at the executive order. We'll look at those things that we feel need to be reviewed, and the executive order tells us needs to be reviewed. We'll start collecting those. We'll start getting those out to the group. Perhaps, Chief, if you could send us, the standard questions that go out in that survey. That way we can all see it and start to better understand how we want to, make some suggestions and changes to those. I would say I'd love to see, the random selection. As a data guy, I would love to tweak that a little bit so that we know we're not, random isn't always good, but a accurate representation of a community is just as important. So maybe we'll take a look at that and how we do that. But at the same time, we can look into, if we want to really start to look at the data, let's figure out what data we want to look at, see what we have from the police department, and if there's gaps. I think that's a huge thing that we might see is maybe there is a gap in the data that we're collecting, or maybe, it's biased in some way due to how it's collected, whether it's collected, based on police reports, or it's collected online, or it's mostly by phone. So we'll be able to look at that. And so, what I'll say is, all of those things, that's why we're doing this. So, Alan, as far as getting all those policies for review, let's take a look at those. Juliana, I think looking at the data that you were talking about before, let's take a look at that and see, based on the bias training that's happening, and the data we collect to ensure that training's working. Let's take a look at that and see. I think that's what we're here to do. Exactly, is ask of us the things that we want to review, that we want to have conversations about, and whether we do it like one of the things we were thinking about first, I think Elaine alluded to before, was doing a presentation by the police. So if we have questions that come in that can form that kind of initial presentation, maybe we don't need a rundown of the budget, but maybe we have questions about training specifically, or the CALIA accreditation, at large, basically. So once we start asking for those things, we'll be able to, whether we want to schedule, we can't go knock on doors or anything. That would be great if we could, but however we want to engage, if it's a listening session, if it's a open meeting that we figure out a way to do now, any of those things, that's what I want. Tell us what we want to do, and let's do it. I think Jim was next, and then Juliana.
Okay. So a very quick question, Chief, for one thing you raised. When is the county deadline for delivering a product that we can review and then start to take into account, because we have to be done by April 21st. So do you know what that is, just off the top of your head?
I do not. We have not established a deadline for the county initiative, but we know that it has to be put out in advance to the April 2021 deadline.
Okay, quick question. Now, in terms of getting to people, is the first thing that came to my mind, except that it's COVID, was, to find ways to get out in the community and have those conversations. So I think we are challenged in that way. Instagram and Pinterest and all those other ways are ways that we need to start to think of to get into to that kind of social milieu. I'll say the perceptions of this committee that I've already encountered coming in here are quite amazing. One said, "Oh, it's another committee to bash the police," to which the response was, "No, they're just talking about how to be safe on the sidewalk." So there's a huge range of what people think this is all about, that I think is also part, but I don't want to lose personally. I have the idea in mind that we're being driven by this specifically because of the Black Lives Matter issue. We need to start to pay attention to that. Doesn't mean we're wrong, doesn't mean we're bashing the police, but we need to be sensitive, open our eyes, and figure out what's going on. And we're not going to do that unless, as Juliana says, we start to look for the people who aren't normally represented in this, because if there's a problem, that's where it is. It's, you know, well, it's not, that's not where it's with us, but that's where it's manifesting itself. So I'll get off the soapbox.
I'll yield my place in the queue to Tony because I think he wanted to say something. I do want to speak, but I wanted to let Tony go first since I've already spoken.
I just wanted to go back to basically getting the word out there. I think with the information that we're asking for, not to overload everyone, so we can be very specific as we delve into this and actually review the information that we're getting. Yes, we definitely, like John said, he put himself out there to be the go-between, or if we want to go directly to the chief himself to ask for this information to review what was asked through executive order. But I do think that we need to get this information in blocks so we have time to review it, to really pay attention to what's there. And then go to the next section as we plan on how to best interact with the community, get and engage with them. Like I said, there's a lot of opportunities out there, whether it's social media, so on and so forth. But it's at the same time, how do we get that social media and those social media outlets out there for people to know what's going on? And I think if we utilize certain things like our local media to get it out there, you know, whether we have a spokesperson or someone to say, hey, this is what we're doing due to the governor's executive order. And we have these avenues where people can come in and say, we have a Facebook page, we have this email address, you guys can mail us your questions so that we can really consolidate and hit those in very, you know, specific ways and basically outreach, almost like a wagon wheel to centrally come back to us. I think that would be great to reach out to those avenues and get that back in, because people do find ways to always meet the information gets out there. So we have to jump on board with that as well to get that back in. Lastly, what I wanted to add in there is as we go through our requests for certain, you know, policies, police policies, I didn't specifically see it in the executive order, but I think an important point to ask for is with those policies, can we is there a written policy on how the police department interviews and hires new and incoming police officers? Because I think that's a very important aspect of any police department or any organization, you know, worldwide, because no matter how great your organization or how great your police department is, you get one bag egg in there. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that is facing us today and facing police departments throughout the nation, is that it's not necessarily, it's causing this box to be created around the police departments where you have 50 outstanding police officers and you have the 51st that comes in there and does something completely out of character and completely against the badge, and it ruins everything. So we need to, I think with that request, is to look at the hiring policy and what background checks are done on people that are applying for our local police department, and kind of review that more as well.
Thank you. Juliana.
So if you all could bear with me, I just want to maybe start by saying I do come to this committee with a place of like trust, right? I have no reason not to trust the work that we're doing in our town or anything like that. So I want to make sure that comes across clearly. And so given that, I think one of the things that could be really helpful to me in relying on the experts in the room, meaning Chief Krell is the expert in the room. And I think I would welcome the chief's recommendation for which documents and which policies and procedures we should be reviewing in response to the things that are specifically highlighted in the executive order. Because I don't know what to ask for, right? And I think him being in it and knowing which policies exist, he's best to tell us like, hey, these are the ones that I believe relate to or are directly connected to what the governor is asking us to do. So that's point number, I think, 2. The next point, I think, one of the things I didn't say this, but my background, I do a lot of strategic planning for work. And one of the things that would be super helpful for me is, as I'm considering the work that we do, the executive order talks about like reducing racial disparity and bias and things like that. Like that's like the ground floor minimum standard of this work, right? And so if we are doing a great job, like how do we do better? How are we the leading standard in how we police and have this type of organization within our community in a way that it sets the standard for other communities like ours across the nation? And so I don't want us to just be focused on like, is it not biased or is it not racist? It's like, how is it like anti-racist? Like, how are we doing the work to safeguard against the possibility that it could be, the bad apple could infiltrate the system? If the system is strong, it's easy to identify that bad apple, right? Because they don't fit, right? It doesn't fit, they can't hide. And so I guess I want to challenge the committee to think more about like, how do we set the standard versus how do we meet the minimum requirements that's being asked of us in this executive order? And that may not be able to be accomplished by April 21. And so I guess that's my plea to say, hey, let's not end this with just checking the box that we've done what needs to be done for the executive order, but think about how we can continue to make this a safe space where people want and desire to be in this community because of the way that we function.
Thank you. Bill?
Yes, I've worked closely with the police department as captain of the fire police in the fire department since 1992. And I'm looking over this document. I'm extremely impressed that in 2010, the department won the flagship award for exemplary law enforcement services and received in its 8th accreditation since 1996, exemplary reviews. I'm not saying we're satisfied and we must be ever vigilant, but with the transparency that exists today, we'd be reading about a problem in the paper. But again, I'm not saying we don't have to keep our guard up. And I think our officers are very well trained. And I must say, we have to educate the young ones to respect not only themselves, but others, and the laws that keep the whole society sane. And so with that, it's a two-way street too, because we're pointing on the officers, but we also have to deal with those that perhaps don't get it. And I say this with a heavy heart and the love for my country. And I'm 79. All right, thank you. That's my piece.
And anyone else want to speak?
I do.
Can we have Ryan?
Hey there. And just piggybacking a little bit off of Juliana, I do think stats are key, but sometimes the stats are not always kind of indicative of, I think we've all seen on the Neighbors app or the Ring app or on Facebook, some of the comments that have been out there. And a lot of it is, well, if it's not all in agreement, then it must be all in disagreement. And one of the key stats that's been put out there, and it's in referencing to hiring of having 2 officers of color on the force, is that indicative of our demographics and of our community? I don't know what the 2020 census is going to say, but as of 2010, the community was 94% white. That being said, pairing that as a direct demographic is not indicative always of people's experiences, or if not of their experiences, their perceptions. So what we're hearing in the city a lot, as far as the studies that we're doing and some of the outreach that we're doing is, okay, how do we either change the experience for the segment of people who either are targeted or feel that they're being targeted, or there's a perception of that either a conversation can't exist or there is a distrust. And so it's not so much to focus on how do the majority of people feel, but how do we make the majority of people feel a certain way, and what can we do better to make sure that people feel a certain way. I am certainly not an expert on how to make that happen, but I think Juliana said it beautifully, is, you know, how do we kind of work towards that in that way? And how do we make the majority of people, and if not the majority, you can't always please everyone, you can't always fix everything for everyone, but how can we work better to make more people in our community feel that way? And some of that may be some reform, some of that might be improving some of the things, as the chief said, always looking to improve some of the modules and some of the training. But I think also getting out there once we get some of these stats, once we get some of these reports, once we get some of the information from what the training has been done, let's also get that out. Let's use social. Let's use some of the other methods. The highest impressions that I can read so far off of the Facebook site and the social media accounts are the Ice Bucket Challenge, the Push-Up Challenge, some of the more trendy community engagement tools that the police department has used. But I think in the current environment, people are more engaged than ever. So as things come up, let people know that there's a committee. Let people know, talking more to the chief, let people know that you've already enacted some of these things and some of these policies that are staked down. And as we work to improve some of these things or just get it on paper, working for multiple nonprofits with different causes, if you're working towards improving a cause that is part of your mission, people don't necessarily think it's inherent that you need to, if it's part of your bylaws and part of your mission, that you need to remind people that it is, because it's inherently part of who you are, is protecting your community and defending your community and being there for all your community members. But sometimes that reminder and that push and that reminder of the policies that are going out there or the policies that are being improved, that's critical. Because people have, in my experience, very, very short memories. And getting out the information that is there, I think, is critical. Like I said, I'm certainly not an expert in that field. I've personally had a great experience growing up here, but I know for some people, they don't necessarily feel comfortable. And I think it's important to address why is that and what can we do to improve that, even if it's not necessarily the voice of the majority. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? I know it's about 8 o'clock now, and if we are good with this discussion, I would like to try to kind of wrap up and figure out what kind of action steps we need to take, and then also kind of reevaluate, is 4 weeks for our next meeting a good amount of time? So it sounds like we need some information and we need data, but I don't know. So I know, go ahead, John.
So if we want to do a little kind of subcommittee thing, I'll be happy to kind of organize whatever requests we have from the chief, even if it's just the more like, what do you think is best? I'll work with the chief. We'll try to get some data out within a week or two. And then if we are meeting in 4 weeks, that'll give everybody some time to read that, to digest it a little bit. And in the meantime, I know, Elaine, you have the form that we're hoping to get answers, questions for the police. And then what I'm thinking is, probably discuss some of that data we're going to look at, a lot of those policies perhaps in the next meeting, but also to start planning our presentation from the police to say, go back over those questions that we've received and, anecdotal stuff that we're getting from our neighbors. And I mean, just based on how this conversation has gone, I think that's a pretty full plate for a next meeting to discuss data and policies, as well as, starting to do that community engagement piece where we're, understanding the questions people have, and maybe even learn as much by the questions that aren't asked that maybe we have on our minds to kind of bring to the forefront, so that we're getting not only from the community and the majority, if you will, but also the people that are here and engaged.
John, if I will, thanks for taking the lead on that. And I just been taking notes here, and these are the things I'm prepared to offer to the group. Is we'll talk about the process that we selected for the random selection of these survey questions. Definitely send out the current survey questions that we amended, I think, last year to these individuals that received those, and talk about how we do that, because it's really two different surveys. There's an annual survey, and then there's a monthly survey that we do every single month, randomly selected individuals that have had contact with the police. So we'll talk about that. I can send the data associated with the most recent Syracuse University Newhouse initiative that we've engaged in for many, many years, and the responses to those particular surveys and how that student from Syracuse University picked apart those questions and then put them in the appropriate format. I have that in a document. I'll review every single policy we have. There's 155 of them by last count. I only know that because I went through every single one of them when I became the chief. So I can share those with this group as long as we keep it sort of close to the chest, because there's some, law enforcement stuff in there that I wouldn't want to see into the general community, but I can review that with everybody, to include the selection process, which I think Alan and Ryan talked about. You'll see in our policy, our selection process, it's very, very substantial. I don't want just anybody wearing a TMPD uniform, and you'll see that in the policy. And then lastly, I'd be more than happy to receive any kind of recommendation or change on our social media platform. I think that's huge, and I would love to be able to tell everybody in our community that subscribes to our Facebook page or whatever other platform on what we do and why we do it. And I think that's an awesome suggestion and a great idea. Keep in mind though, I have a limited budget. I have limited resources, and John, I see you shaking your head, to have a full-time employee, whether if it's a police officer or a civilian, to manage our social media input and management, that's a lot of work. But again, I'm not saying it's not impossible, and that's why I'm glad this committee is together to give these type of recommendations. I mean, if I had a full-time person or a couple full-time people to put out social media on everything we do, then I would love to be able to do that. But we're a little bit limited. So, but again, I'm looking forward to those suggestions.
Sally?
Chief, perhaps I missed it. I just have a quick question. I didn't hear you say whether your officers are surveyed. And because their input would be very important also, to get their feelings and how they interpret the data that's coming in. I might have missed that, and I apologize if I did.
No, you didn't miss it, and that's a great question, Sally. That every one of those surveys that come back to us, and it's anonymous, so people they can say whatever they want to say, good or bad. Those are all collected by the division commander that runs the operations division for every one of our police officers. And if they're good, the officer receives praise. If they're bad, the officer receives training. So they're trickled down through the department, through the division commander, and they're very, very helpful, because I can't police a community of 32,000 people by myself. And that's why we do the surveys, so that when we get input from our community randomly, we can address those concerns. There's been many things that have been addressed in these random surveys, both the annual survey and the monthly surveys that we do, that have identified issues. Because we're not perfect. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I mean, we make mistakes, right? But the more input I get from the community through these surveys or through emails or conversations, phone calls, whatever avenue that exists for me to get input, positive or negative, we address those concerns. And in addition to that, every single year, I have an open training session with every single member of the department, from the mechanic all the way up to one of my commanders. And I open the floor and say, look, here's your opportunity. Tell me what we need to fix, and let's identify what's broken, and we'll fix it, and we'll come up with a plan to fix it. So there's a lot of different avenues there, but there's definitely opportunity for input and improvement.
That was the one I was asking, actually, to survey those officers to see how they're feeling, not how they interpreted the data that was coming in, but what about their own personal data and the police force. And because sometimes they're, they may have some ideas too. And I'm sure you're very open to them, because I've seen that happen But I think that's important too in this time that they're going through, to be able to hear them.
Christine?
So that was one of my questions as well of, I think that there's a reality that comes with having your boss ask you for feedback. And so I wonder if there is anything that is anonymous that's given to the police officers, number one. Number two, I appreciate you providing some trust in us around some of your more sensitive information inside the police department, keeping in mind that this is live streamed. So I want to say, like, but I do appreciate you being willing to do that, because I know every organization has sensitive information. So I agree to honor that for you. And then the other question I have about the social media is, one of the ways that we might engage the community is to get some young, well, no, I don't want to be ageist, some people that understand how to do this stuff and this internet engagement, and see if they might volunteer to create, some things online that would reach out to the community. Because I know you can't pay everyone, but maybe some people would be excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have data coming in, policies coming, and asking community questions, or getting questions from the community. How does that all sound? Good?
I would just tweak. We're not just asking the community for questions, but ideas, right? So, yeah, just a minor thing there.
So I could ask them questions if they have any questions for Manlius, the town of Manlius Police, and then and then in a different question, ask them if they have any ideas to share. Okay. And is everyone good still with 4 weeks? So our next meeting would be September 24th at 6:30. Does that work with everyone? Okay, great. And the state also sent that guide, the packet, and that was very in-depth and long. I had not had time to read the whole thing, so definitely look at that as well. Again, it might not all apply, but potentially we could pull pieces out that we do think may apply. Everyone received that, correct? The state guide? Okay, great. Anything else? Are we all set? Okay, great. This was a fantastic first meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. I'll be getting out emails to everyone. And if you have any questions at all, please contact me. I'm always happy to help. And I think that's it. Have a good night. Okay?
Nice to meet all of you.
Good night. Nice to meet you.
Night.